let me take a moment to introduce our esteemed panelists for you. So, and I'm going to start from left to right on my screen. I'm not sure how that works on y'all's screen, but Kelly Dostal, as a 2005 graduate, she played on the field hockey team, quite successful in her career in field hockey, not only at Wake Forest, but elsewhere. Kelly is the director of inside sales organization at Dell Technologies. She's responsible for building Dell's next generation of sales leaders and for leading and inspiring early career talent. She's been at the company for over 8 years, and she has the keen ability to identify talent to manage a multi-site business and to meet growth demands in a fast-paced environment. Prior to joining Dell, she was a student athlete here at Wake, as I mentioned, and a member of not just one, not just two, but 3 national championship teams. I suddenly feel quite inadequate. Prior to joining, she graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree with a focus in health and exercise science. For 5 years after graduating from Wake, she represented the United States while playing on the U.S. field hockey national team. Before beginning at Dell Technologies, she coached at UMass and the University of Louisville. She currently resides in Boston, Massachusetts. Amogh Prabhkar, am I close? Say it one more time for us. Okay, all right. Prabhkar, okay. He's Vice President, U.S. Rate Sales for Barclays Capital. After graduating from Wake with a degree in finance, he began working as an analyst in interest rate sales in New York. He's been promoted to an associate and now a VP in the same role. He works with institutional clients on their interest rate needs. Apart from his direct job, he is also involved with running the internship program and with post-grad hiring needs. Finally, Kreg Rotthoff, and hopefully I got that one right. Maybe I'm 2 for 3. Amogh, by the way, played tennis here and graduated from Wake in 2003. Greg played football here and graduated in 2006. He's a sales manager for Blackbaud. He spent the last 15 years helping companies and nonprofits make the most out of their technology investment. Having worked as a consultant, account executive, manager, and client, he has a firm understanding about all the ways technology can impact an organization. And one of the things that I hope that you're seeing through that some of the things that tie in these esteemed panelists that are with us tonight is not only success, in athletics, but certainly success off the field. But all of these roles are going to require quite a bit in the way of leadership and leadership development. And so part of what we're going to ask our panelists tonight is for some of their views on leadership, some of the things that have worked for them, what they look for in a teammate, what they look for in someone that they're going to hire. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that, if you look at what Amogh studied from a finance standpoint, you look at what Kelly studied and what Greg studied, there's a lot of different things that they learn from a content standpoint at Wake Forest. Some of the things that I think sometimes go underappreciated are things like how to become a better leader, how to become a better communicator, right? Some of the things that either with communication or psychology, some of the things that are related to psychology, and certainly leadership is part of that. And so we'd like to dig in and get your advice and get your sense of what has made you successful from a leadership standpoint. I want to make one other announcement before we start. The student athlete leadership panel that we're privy to tonight, and certainly feel very fortunate to have for you tonight, is part of the Deacon Leader System, sponsored by WFU Athletics and the Legacy Center for Leadership and Character. The Deacon Leader System enhances student athletes and staff members' leader development, and the Deacon Leader System advances the athletic department's vision of creating champions. And so we'd like to thank both WFU Athletics and the Legacy Center for Leadership and Character for making tonight a possibility. So what I thought I would do is just start off very general here and let you all take these questions. I'll certainly look for opportunities for you all to volunteer if you want to answer a particular question. I don't have necessarily one for each of you. And so if you don't want to respond to each of the questions, you certainly don't need to, and we can move on to other questions. I also encourage those of you who are in the audience to put some of your questions in the Q&A, and we will find ways to certainly incorporate your good questions for our panelists. So let me kind of start here with just a general question. How do you ensure your organization, and this is really apart from leadership, although it may involve leadership, continuously improves? What are the things that are necessary to engender continuous improvement in your organization? And then anybody can start.
Sure, I'll go ahead. So I think the two things, two great characteristics of leadership is one, being great in crisis. Obviously this is a great example right now. The world going through, every organization is going through its own form of crises. But I think another great quality of a good leader is being innovative when you're ahead, right? Like when things are going well, how do you get better? And in my particular field, I think it's about really pushing forward with your strengths. I think in general, most organizations, whether it's sports teams, etc., it's hard to really invest in your strengths, right? Because you always feel like if I can correct my weaknesses, I can get better. But sometimes I feel that it's not enough investment in either resources or just from your money investment perspective or from time is spent in kind of increasing your strengths. And I think that's something that I've learned over time, and that's something I've made clear in my organization that hey, this is an area where we're doing well in. We should be investing more resources, more balanced resources, more technology here. And it's a very simple thing, but it's actually much harder to do because you're always trying to fix the leaks, right? Like things that aren't going well. And I think investing in strengths is a really important one.
Let me double click on that a little bit. Oh, go ahead, Greg, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, another thing after, I think is really about the culture that you're in at an organization. We all have had the privilege of being at Wake, where it's a really good community and the dialogue's open and you're heard. And that's the same with corporations. You can find yourself in a corporation where continuous improvement, Kaizen, if I hark back to my business school days, is a part of the institution. You're expected to speak up, you're expected to improve, etc. But if you're a part of an organization where that's not the culture, you still need to be the squeaky wheel. You need to come with a business case, a resolution, why it impacts the business the way that it does, and make the case for a change. So I've had the privilege of being on both sides of that spectrum from a cultural perspective. But sometimes you have to insert yourself and make it happen. And sometimes that's just a part of the culture and it happens by nature.
Yeah, and happy to comment a little bit as well. Completely agreed with the feedback that's already been given. And I think when you look at the companies that the three of us work for, Barclays, Dell Technology, Blackbaud, right? Very, very reputable companies. Going to a school like Wake Forest, a very reputable school, top upper echelon of what we're a part of. So it's very, very easy to fall back and say, well, we've always done it this way. So why do we need to change, right? And that can be an absolute killer of business. It can be a killer of a sports team, right? I know Kenny mentioned I was a part of 3 national championships while I was at Wake Forest. We didn't repeat what we did year after year. We didn't just say, well, this is how we did it last year. Let's do it exactly like that. Personnel changes, talent changes. There are changes that are constantly evolving, constantly happening. And, being a part of one of the largest technology companies in the world, we have to evolve as quickly and improve as quickly as technology is improving. Second to that, I think one of the areas that certainly I've focused on for my organization to make sure that we're growing, evolving, and constantly improving is making sure that we're bringing diversity into our organization. We know that diversity does a couple of different things for an organization, right? It's going to encourage things like creativity, innovation, team members that are going to be more committed, more engaged. So I think that those are 2 areas for me to further comment on from what we've heard already that have really helped grow my organization and make sure that we're not being complacent, that we're constantly improving and constantly evolving.
So I sense a common thread here. Some of the things that you've all said in terms of there's an idea, and especially I think, Kelly, what you just made really salient is this idea of being open to change and managing change, right? And so that's one of the more difficult things, I think, for all human beings, right? There are a lot of people that are averse to change just because change means not only more work or different work, but it also means I suddenly have to learn how to do things differently. And it's very easy for me just to kind of put it on autopilot and continue to do things the way that I've done it for so long. So how do you get others around you? So you're open to change and you've learned how to become open to change, and how do you get others to be equally excited, or at least make it palatable that change is necessary?
Yeah, I can, I'll start there. If you're in a management position, it's a lot easier. You get to dictate the culture. You get to dictate the culture in your team and those spherical divisions that are surrounding you, and you get to lead by example. And what I mean by that is leading with integrity, but leading with honesty and leading with open feedback and candor, and allowing that type of behavior to thrive within your organization. The issue is when it's a closed culture and that type of behavior is not rewarded, then you're flying blind, because nobody's going to tell you when there's a problem staring at your face you can't see. So that's really one of the things is really make trust, transparency, innovation a part of their culture and reward that, because you can easily go the other way, and then you might not see it coming.
I think to bounce off that, I also think it's how do you make change a good thing is the question. I also think it's important to change for the right reasons. You know, I mean, financial services, technology, like I work in the markets, like it's moving every day. You know, but we have to change things that require changing, right? Because sometimes we get caught in the cycle of trying to change for the sake of change, because something just happened, and, you know, someone had a great quarter doing one thing and everyone should copy it, but we should also evaluate why we're doing certain things, right? And I've, you know, been part of decisions where we've made these changes a little too soon without fully, you know, looking at all the different angles and ramifications of it. And that's actually been a hindrance for us, and then it actually makes future change harder, right? Because people harp back to that example that didn't work out as well. So I think in order for a complete buy-in, it has to be done for the right reasons, and it has to be done. You can't just keep changing all the time just for the sake of it, because then people won't follow you and won't respect your vision as much.
Okay, thank you. We had a question that came in the chat from Dr. Pat Sweeney, and Dr. Pat Sweeney, just to make sure that I'm getting his question exactly right. What leadership advice would you give to student athletes who are sitting here in the audience tonight? So we'll move to leadership more specifically.
Yeah, I'm happy to start it. I think, you know, a couple of things for myself and thinking about, you know, my own leadership style and leadership advice is, you know, it's a really broad question, and it's one that, you know, there's so many different things, and you can try to be a million different leaders, and you need to be able to, you know, kind of understand what works for you and what works for your leadership style across, you know, the three of us that have joined you tonight. We all probably have very different leadership styles, but are effective at similar things because, you know, we are who we are, and you know, it works for us. And I think a couple of things for me when I think about, you know, leading teams and sticking to some core principles for myself, I stick to three specific things, or try to stick to three specific things. First and foremost is being accountable. So holding myself and my team members accountable. I'm probably not going to ask anyone on my team to do anything that I haven't done already, whether it's, you know, previously and as I've grown in my own career, or something that I don't, you know, think that they have the resources to be able to do effectively. So holding myself and others around me accountable. The second one is being as approachable as possible. And I ask that of all of, you know, my leaders that work for me. I want to be someone who the organization views as incredibly approachable. And then the third one is respect, right? So looking at approachability, accountability, and respect. And commenting very briefly on respect. I think as a leader, I've seen some of my younger leaders that have joined my team, they get caught in being in this sort of comparison of being well-liked versus well-respected. You can be a well-respected leader, and you're not always going to be the most well-liked. But at the end of the day, some of my favorite coaches in my time, some of my favorite, you know, leaders that I've worked for, they've made decisions that I respect, that are sometimes not always going to be the popular decision, but I know ultimately is the most respected decision. And they are always leaders that I have held in the highest regard, that are willing to make those tough decisions. So those are probably my three things that I try to hold on to as much as possible from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, and to spin off what Kelly just mentioned, she's going with the stay true to thyself as a leader and own that leadership quality. And that's intrinsic. What I would say is we've all walked this road as athletes. We all know what good leadership looks like. One of the things I thought to bring to the table is, we've had great coaches and we have terrible coaches. We have coaches that can motivate us. We have coaches that demotivate us. So as you go through your athletic journey, try to assimilate those coaching moments of those who are good and great versus those that aren't good, and assimilate that into your leadership style and qualities. Because coaches are just that, they're leaders in themselves. So take what you have along the way, build that up, and start forming your leadership style along the way with those that you like and don't like, along with what your personal leadership style is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think number one is always knowing what your personal leadership style is, and that, for me, it was always by example. When I was captain of the team, like I was a junior, everybody else was like, we had mostly juniors in the team, and they don't need a lot of leading at that point, right? So it was always lead by example. Make sure you're try to get run if you're running some kind of sprints, try to be the first. But I really want to give this quote a few things that I saw from, I want to say it was Bill Walsh that wrote this, but I think it's a really good 7 steps to leadership. Number one, give them a plan. Pretty straightforward. Push them when they go too slow. Calm them when they go too fast. Give them faith in what they're doing. Inspire them when they fall short. Stand behind them when they have success and let them take the success.
Sure.
And stand in front of them when they start taking bullets. And this was an old Bill Walsh principle from the 1980s. And, something that I learned a couple years ago. And I think every single one of those things rings true. Give them a plan, very straightforward. Push them when they go too slow. Like no one really knows their limits. Sometimes they go too fast. Calm them down, rein them in, and then inspire them when they fall short. Like it's important as a leader to inspire and really make people believe that they can do better. So stand behind them when they have success. Let them own it. Like let them be the reason where we're winning. And stand in front of them when they start taking bullets. Like when shit hits the fan, just take it. It's on you, right? Because you're the leader. You have to own all the bad decisions as well.
So terrific advice, actually, from all three of you. Really, really great. Now, I've taken all sorts of notes here from all three of your comments. So those are all things that we say, these are the things that I think are, important for leaders to have in terms of characteristics or ways forward or different steps that you take with followers and those types of things. I'm wondering if we can take it to the other side, because I think sometimes we learn a lot from failure or difficulty or adversity. And that is, what has been your greatest leadership challenge? Not so much a specific instance, but if you're willing to share, what has been hardest about becoming a leader? Leadership is incredibly difficult, right? I think it's easy for us to sit in classes and at times and think that leadership is something that, of course, it all sounds intuitive. Yeah, until you have to do it, until you have to get buy-in. So what do you think is the most difficult thing that you wish you'd known 10 years ago, or that you've really faced some kind of, this is more difficult than it looks like on paper? What's the biggest challenge of a leader?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that one first. I think the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges as a leader, is getting the most out of the people that work for you. And that's the same as the coach and the athletes themselves. But the unique thing is how do you individually coach and manage each one of those resources to get the most out of them uniquely? Every person's unique. Everybody's motivations are unique. And while we all have the same goals, we all care about different things. And so one of the things I found quickly in my tenure as a manager is find out what intrinsically motivates them, figure out who they are and what they care about, and get to know them as a human, and use that information to help move and motivate them forward. If you treat everybody exactly the same, you're never going to be the leader you want to be. Figure out who they are and what they're about, and then you can coach and get the most out of them. So I'd say one of the top things you can do is figure out and deal with each person as an individual. Because the reason it's hard is because it goes outside your comfort zone. You want to coach somebody that looks and smells like you, right? And that's the easiest thing to do. When somebody else is a little bit different, then you have to change your behavior to their behavior, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Craig's feedback. I think that one of the things that I've struggled with a bit, and I've seen some of my leaders struggle with along the way, is I guess wanting it, whatever it is, more than, other people may want it. And that can be frustrating, but it's also knowing that, you're going to have, it's sort of the bell curve effect, right? You're going to have your top performers, you're going to have your middle of the pack folks, and you're going to have your sort of bottom of the pack folks. We have to get our middle of the pack people to be incredibly, incredibly productive. We have to pull our sort of bottom of the curve folks along and squeeze everything that we can out of them, and know that, there's contribution that can be had from everyone. If we suddenly forget about the middle and the bottom performers, we're going to have a business that's plummeting pretty quickly. And to add one more piece for myself that I think is probably the least fun part of being a leader, I'm sure being a coach and being in leadership roles, is identifying things like unethical behavior and or identifying, folks in your business that, you probably need to start looking at performance managing out of the business. And, it's never a fun thing for anyone, realizing that someone's maybe not a great fit for the role or whatever it may be. And, whether it's A, they're not a great fit, or B, they're not willing to put in the effort to, will their way through this role and through the hard times. That's probably the least fun part of the job that, we would all probably love to not have as a part of our job. But I think ultimately great leaders also have the ability to identify when and where we need to make those pretty tough decisions to move the business forward, to move the team forward into a space that we need to get to continue to strive for excellence.
Yeah, and
while you're there, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, going off that, it's obviously if you're managing people, but it's also managing up, because we all have our own bosses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes our boss tells something that we have to communicate to the rest of our teams, and it's important to communicate that in the right way, I think, because like our bosses have a vision above us to tell us something to execute the vision. We have to tell someone else to execute the vision for their vision, right? So it's really about being a good communicator. Like sometimes it's very obvious to me, like why we want something done, but if I'm not good at communicating it to people, then I'm not being a good leader, right? So I think that's a big point as well.
So communication is key. It's what I'm hearing from all three of you. Actually, I want to revisit, because I think this is a really important point, Kelly, that you made about ethics, right? So you talked about this kind of being able to pinpoint unethical behavior, or perhaps when you're going down the wrong boulevard from a standpoint of, and that can become a slippery slope, right? How do you shape an ethical culture in your organization? What's kind of the recipe for that, or how do you do that? How do you mold that?
Yeah, I mean, I truly believe that it's imperative to being successful. And a couple things for me. I think first and foremost, it's just critical that you set expectations. People have to understand, what is our code of conduct here? What are the expectations that we have? And they can seem very obvious, but it's important that you set expectations. I ask my team to set and reset expectations on a quarterly basis. So every 3 months we're having this conversation. From there, ensuring that we're inspecting what we expect of our team, right? If you expect something of your team and you're not inspecting it, that's where, holes start to get poked, corners start to get cut. And we need to make sure that we are spot checking and have a good system of checks and balances. Making sure that your values are very clearly outlined. And then the final piece, and I think one that you can see it happen on sports teams, you see it happen in business as well, is being blinded by talent, right? And making sure that you're not blinded by talent when you may have a hunch that there's a potential character issue with a hire, whether it's a recruited student athlete. You can have the most talented person, but if they have character issues, ethics issues, they can spoil a great team. We see it happening in business as well. So making sure that if you have a 10 out of 10 knockout person from a talent perspective, but they have some character issues, that 11 out of 10 times you don't make that hire and you don't make that mistake. So those are a couple things for me.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Follow up there, or?
No, she did pretty well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I want to visit something else also that was mentioned a little bit earlier, and that is when we go back to leadership advice. One of the things that I think is really difficult for our student athlete leaders is this idea that really is the crossroads between I want to be popular, I want to be liked, and yet I've got to become the leader that my coach or that my team desperately and dearly needs me to be successful, right? And so how do you fight against that when, as you said, I think, Kelly, you made this point about, right, sometimes to be a great leader, you're not going to be popular for a night, week, month, right? How do you help folks that are student athletes today look and say what's best for the team is not necessarily perhaps is to be as popular, but what's best for the team? We're going to win. And for me to be the leader, I can't do something that's going to get me a popularity contest or a vote. I've got to do what's right for the team. So how would you advise our student athletes to prioritize that over the interpersonal desire to be liked and the comfort with that?
I think it just starts by leading by example. I think, if you're the first one, the most energetic person for the 6 a.m. runs, if you're, the first one at practice, if you're the one who's trying hard every single day at every activity that you're doing, all at the same time, if you're like a senior and you have a bunch of freshmen or sophomores on your team and you are showing up, working the hardest, doing well in school, all those things, I think that's where it starts, because that just builds respect and someone to look up to. When I was a freshman, I had a couple of people on the team that I looked up to because, they were really good players, they were really good in school, and they were just good people, right? And that molded at least my personal style, is that you start with yourself and leading by example, because you're still trying to get better every day, right? Like, you don't want to lose to the freshmen. Like, you want to get better every day. So I think starting with that, that just shows your commitment to the team and to getting better. And I think that just builds respect, and that's the first step.
Yeah, and I think I take it into not only how you can do this as a student athlete, but as a leader in the business world as well. And it's kind of riffing off what he just said, is it really is about choosing the behavior that's going to make you the most successful, and understanding and being disciplined to do what that is, rather than living in the limelight or being liked by others. And so choosing the behavior that's going to get you the outcomes you want. And then if you are a leader, my mantra is be firm, but polite, but firm. This is the way it's going to happen. This is how we're going to do it. And this is how we're going to be successful. And if your behaviors stray off that path, then you're not on the same page. This isn't the goal you want to accomplish. And, we have to have a conversation about that. So it's in living the behaviors that will get the outcome that you want, which is usually success, whether it's in the athletic endeavor that you're in, or in the quarter or annual year that you're in, but also calling a spade when it's not going, when the behavior's not right.
Good. Okay, thank you. I want to talk. That's all very helpful advice. I want to talk a little bit about the communication piece here, just for a moment, and ask so oftentimes leaders are told what they want to hear, right? because the person that's giving you that feedback, right, is not necessarily wanting to be critical. And again, you talk about managing upward especially. So I'm wondering, in your organizations or in organizations that you've seen have been most successful at this, how do you encourage honest and transparent feedback, both that you're receiving perhaps from a follower, right? But so both upward and downward. What do you have to do in your organization to instill that and make sure that that becomes part of the culture?
I'm happy to start. I think one thing, it's very simple, but it's often overlooked, is actually providing a forum for feedback. Right? Sometimes people, they don't necessarily know when and where is it appropriate to give feedback. And it's critical that we provide a forum, whether it's an open forum, survey forum, whatever the case may be, depending on, the organization team that we may be talking about. I think that limiting feedback really, again, it stunts growth, it limits excellence. And I think sometimes as leaders, you can get stuck thinking my way or the highway, and that can be incredibly, incredibly limiting for sure. So, I work very, very open with feedback, and I also be willing, I try to be as willing as possible to expose myself and outward to my team, to my, greater organization, where I'll talk about things that we need to do to improve. I'll talk about things that I need to do to improve. So, infusing a little bit of that, hey, I'm showing that it's okay to give feedback. I'm opening the door to show you that it's also okay to give feedback, and, be as transparent as you can be. So I think, a couple of things there. One, giving a forum, and two is showing that you as a leader are willing to look critically at yourself and some of the things that you think need to change and improve or change and evolve as well.
Yeah, I think the forum is really important. I'll give a really, really quick story. I had a manager who I thought was okay. She was whatever. And then I moved teams middle of the year, a few years ago, and I had this new manager. And every year we have a year-end review. We sat down and he said, I'm not going to tell you any of the good stuff you've done this year, because that's not going to help you. And we went through a 30-minute session of all the things I could do better. That's all. And, I had a really good year. So I was like, I was pretty pumped. I was excited. And then he literally just, kind of ripped me for 30 minutes, but in a good way, right? But going back to Craig's point earlier about knowing your team, knowing that every individual is different. He knew that he could do that to me because I appreciate that kind of feedback, right? I was thick-skinned. I didn't care that he was, kind of telling me all these things. It was the best thing that had anyone ever told me in the 4 years of working, that, I don't care. I don't want to tell you all the good things you've done. I want to tell you all the things you can do better. And really bouncing off what Greg said earlier of like knowing your team and then kind of just being honest about it. And he even gave me advice, such as how his bosses had told him this as well, and that kind of, and I've told that to some of my juniors since then. And they've been pretty open about it too, because you've kind of built this good line of communication. And having that forum, like Kelly mentioned, was really important. And just knowing that it works for some people is also important. And at the end of the day, like if you really want to be something long term, someone telling you how you could do better for 30 minutes is the best thing anybody can ever tell you.
Yeah, and two last points I'd add to that thought. One, receiving feedback up the chain, to your comment, Kenny. Creating the forums, etc., is incredibly important, but also making it actionable. Getting feedback and doing something with it is really important. I've been in organizations that you can give all the feedback you want and nothing changes, and then you stop giving feedback. And two, encouraging the positive behavior. If you get feedback and you don't like it or you think it's wrong, any type of negative response will ensure that person will never give you feedback again. So keeping a positive mindset when receiving the feedback up the ladder. And then if I'm soliciting feedback and giving it to my manager, basically if you're complaining about something, come with a resolution as well. Hey, here's the problem. Here's what's going on. Here's how I think we can fix it. Don't just be a squeaky wheel. Come with a resolution to the issue as well.
Okay. and the importance also, I think, of circling back once you give someone some feedback that might be some constructive criticism and you actually see a change in the behavior, making sure that you go back and circle back and say, hey, Kelly, you know what? I noticed that those things change, right? Because otherwise it feels like, well, wait, I think I changed in line with the feedback. I took the feedback well, but it was never acknowledged. And so I'm not sure that I know that. Is that, would you say also a key of leadership is making sure that you circle back to reinforce the behavior that you've, right? I mean, because I think sometimes in our teams, right, we give feedback as leaders on our teams. Do we go back and we circle back with those folks and say, hey, I just want you to let you know, I noticed that you did that on the practice field or in the office or whatever, and the importance of that and how wonderful that feels, not only for the giver of the feedback, but certainly the recipient of that feedback. So that's really terrific. Well, we've got a couple questions here that have been submitted, and so I'd like to ask the first. The first comes from student Alicia Evans. She asks, how did you get your first job out of Wake? And do you have any advice on that front? And I'll let anybody chime in there and battle right out. That one is, I think, the one that's gotten the most smiles thus far across the board, consensus smile. So any thoughts there for Alicia?
Happy to start. Alicia, I do what I could to put that off for as long as I could by trying to play. I was super fortunate, very, very, lucky to be able to continue my playing career. On the national team, I had a gut that maybe that would be my path as, my college career continued to evolve and, saw an opportunity, but also very, very well knew that being an elite athlete has a window and that window closes quickly for some people. And certainly, I spent five years playing on the national team when I graduated and then coached a bit. So transitioned out of sport through coaching, which really provided me a wonderful platform to learn more about myself as a leader and more as a young professional off of the playing field, off of that other side of the line or off the track or the field or the court or whatever your space may be. And for me, as I started to transition away from sport and started to think about corporate America or moving out of, the roles that I had been in, I started to take a look at the things that I liked and the things that I felt that I was good at. And I also knew that I'd have to take some risks. I had some naysayers out there, including my parents, which are probably the toughest naysayers to have, that were really questioning why I was walking away from something that I had known for so long and something that I, had built a really strong network in and had been doing a nice job in. And I felt I wanted to challenge myself in a really different way. And I always knew that if it didn't work out, I could take a step back into sport. And so I took that risk and I think that growth happens when you're really out of your comfort zone, and that's super cliche, but I've seen it play itself out time and time again. So, looking at roles that you may have never thought you'd be good at, trust. If you told me when I was in school that I would have gotten into sales, I would have told you that is not the thing that I will be doing. I think 60% of people that get into sales never thought in their wildest dreams they would do that. And I was certainly one of those that made that statistic a thing. So I've taken some risks along the way and have ultimately found that a lot of what I learned and who I'd become through sport are a lot of the things that have shaped me into a successful person in the business world. So all of what you're doing today is going to continue to shape your future. So for me, my biggest piece of advice is be willing to take risks, be willing to look at job descriptions that maybe you don't fill 10 out of 10 of the requirements. Maybe you only fill a couple of them. Get out there and see if, that may be a viable opportunity for you, because you never know. And a job on a job description versus the reality of that job could be very different. So you got to get out there, poke around a little bit, see what's out there, see what feels like a good fit for you. Similar to where you chose where you're going to go to school, it felt like the right fit. You'll start to get that feeling as you poke around in the job market as well.
Terrific, Kelly. Thank you.
Yeah, I think to second that, I did not go on to a long, illustrious professional career. Rather, I found halfway through my Wake Forest career that I needed to find an education and a job real fast. So one thing I can say, though, is that, the common thread is a student athlete. And being an athlete is a clear differentiator in the business profession. So don't sell yourself short based on, perhaps, to Kelly's point, missing criteria on X, Y, and Z applications. Find what you want to do, find what you're passionate about, find what drives you and motivates you, and see if you can do something professionally that has that. I'm in sales, I'm in technology. I love both of those things, but I also help nonprofits. And that fulfills me at the end of the day. I took a 6-year hiatus at Salesforce, and I didn't have that fulfillment. I had technology and sales, but I certainly wasn't helping make the world a better place. So with that being said, push your comfort zone, as Kelly said, but don't undersell yourself as an athlete. You have 2 things that I look for: grit and determination and coachability. Those things are such high commodities in the business world, and we have those in spades as athletes. So think of that as a gold star on your resume and push your comfort zone for what might be the job you want.
Terrific. Thank you. Let's stay in the chat, or actually in our Q&A feature tonight, where we have from an attendee here in the audience ask, do you have any leadership regrets looking back on your college days? That's question 1. And then we'll go a little bit further here by asking, would you change anything knowing what you know now that you didn't know then? We're not getting quite as many smiles on that question, but yet another probing question here. Certainly I'm on the edge of my chair, literally, to hear the answer. I mean, what are your thoughts there?
I mean, of course, yeah, you're going to have things that you wish you did better. I know I do. In terms of, my example was my best friend was at one point just not motivated to play, just not, and not to practice, etc. And, it took us a while to come up with a good plan because he was very talented. He's one of the best players on the team. And like I said, he's one of my close friends to this day. It's still, it was a hard decision and conversation to have, but it took longer than I would have liked. It took much longer than I would have liked. Going back, I think I wish I had just been more direct and asked him why. He was going through some personal stuff. There was a lot of things going on. It was just tough. But yeah, it's definitely something I regret. Like you can't not, right? At the same time, like you can't just live with the regret. You kind of just, you move on from it, and you hope it's best. And I just wish I was more direct. I just wish I hadn't been as good of a friend to him. I just wish I'd been more of I just asked him, not even as a friend, just asked him what we can do, straight up. And it just took me too long to do that.
Thank you for that very candid feedback.
Yeah, I love the question, and thinking about regrets. I think I'm sure the 3 of us all have probably things that we regret, from it. But I also, there's the cliche or the quote of, live with no regrets, and it's a hard thing to do. But at the same time, reflecting back on my time as a student athlete at Wake Forest, I, held leadership roles on the team, and very fortunate for those experiences. And thinking back, I'm sure there are things that I'd change, but also, I think about, are there things that I regret? I'd like to say no, because, I felt like I was making the best decisions along with, co-captains and, our coaching staff and things like that, based on who I was at that moment, the skills that I had at that point in my life, at that point in my playing career, at that point in my academic career, right? Just thinking about who I was at that point, and all you can do is make decisions that you think are the best ones with the resources and the knowledge that you have on board based on where you're at physically, emotionally, mentally, all those things that come into play. And the only thing that we can do is look back and, maybe learn from those experiences, grow and evolve as a leader in the future. And if you had decisions that went awry, how can we maybe, evolve those next time or learn from those next time? But I think looking back and saying, wow, I grossly regret some of those decisions. I think, all of us as leaders, we try to make the best ones that we can with where we're at in that point in our lives.
Thank you. Very, very honest and transparent feedback, and I appreciate that. We have another question that's come in, and I'm sorry to hop from question to question, but I do want to make sure that we get all the questions that are here with for us tonight. The next question: do you feel that employers considered the fact that you were a college athlete when they looked into hiring you Do you think that being a D1 athlete is an advantage when applying for jobs? And I suppose a follow-up to that is, how does one leverage, if so, how does one leverage their experience as a D1 athlete and all the abstract things that characterize student athletes, generalizing here, when applying for a job or on the job front?
Yeah, I'll go first. The answer is yes, they do look at that. They do care about that. And you should highlight it brightly on your resume as you send those out the door. The things that I have mentioned earlier, it's the grit, it's the determination, it's the perseverance, it's the willingness to work hard for an outcome. You may be shocked because the environment you're currently in, that everybody's working hard, everybody's trying to be successful. And once you get into the working world, that's not always the case. So those things are skills that will set you apart from your peers, and how you can leverage that. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the phone call.
Yeah, sorry,
it's okay. So
that's all right. That makes it more fun.
You can certainly use that as a networking device, but predominantly the pitch is, I know how to work hard. I know how to be successful. If you can coach me and put me in the right direction, that's for you. And the skills and et cetera will follow. And that's the confidence you need to have going into a job. But I'll pass the buck here.
Yeah, no, I mean, agreed, right? I hosted a webinar last week recruiting specifically student athletes, or, it was built out targeting student athletes. So if that's the cleanest answer I can give you, then there you go. But I think a couple other things to comment on is, we often think about our successes on the field or on the court, or, again, whatever your arena may be. But oftentimes we also need to think about our failures, right? The ability that we all have to overcome failure, to take coaching and feedback. We hear it day in and day out as athletes, right? Day after day after day is, ways that we can improve. That will pay dividends for you for the rest of your career, right? Whatever you go into, whether it's the business world or another space as you pursue your next steps from a career perspective. Those are massively, massively important things that a lot of folks really struggle with. They struggle with their first failures. And for us, we've been failing since we could, drag a bat or kick a ball behind us, drag a bat behind us or kick a ball in front of us. And we've been getting that coaching and feedback. And what we've been doing with that is we've been applying it as quickly as we can to be able to grow and evolve. We didn't decide our senior year in high school that we wanted to go to Wake Forest and be a Division I student athlete. We've been honing these skills and applying feedback since, we were little tiny ones. And that's the same thing with your career. You have to know it's a journey and it's a progression, but a lot of the skills that you've learned, that foundation that you've built, are things that you take for granted until you get out there and you realize not everyone's like that. And I think that sometimes when we're, at a phenomenal athletics department with a ton of resources and incredibly talented people, we're almost a little bit insulated to the world that's out there, that, there are a lot of people out there that are nowhere near as talented as each and every one of you are, that don't have nearly the experience, don't have nearly the, ups and downs that you've all been through and navigated through, and, are making 45 minutes tonight to join this call with your incredibly busy schedule. Like, there's so many things that you're so adept at doing that you won't really realize until you get out there and you see, wow, not everyone operates this way. And that is an incredible differentiator.
I just want to add one thing is, as part of my job, I mentioned, you mentioned that, I do work with our intern program and hiring and stuff like that. And yes, obviously being a student athlete helps, but don't let that be the only thing about you. I interviewed a guy, who played D1 sports at an Ivy League school, and that was all he talked about during the interview. It's great. It's a big part of your life. I get it. I was there, but when you're interviewing, don't let that be the only thing you say. Don't, this is a really bad cliche, but don't be like the meathead guy, just that's not the only thing about you, right? Like, if you get an interview and at a a firm or whatever, you've been through screening processes, don't let that be the only thing about you, right? Because I'm not hiring you to be a lacrosse player. I'm hiring you to do XYZ job, right? So yeah, take those skills, And if there's examples you can give of how you've learned and learn from failures, like Kelly said, which I think is huge, that's awesome and that's great. And you can talk about leadership, great, but don't let that be the only thing about you. Because I've seen the flip side of it where that's all they talk about. And it's, I don't know if they're good for the job. I think they're a great athlete. I just don't know if they're good for the job.
Thanks to each of you. We're at about 6 minutes to the top of the hour, and so let me ask one question here that I think we can move forward with, and this will probably be our last question of the evening. A question's come in the Q&A. Who do you look for in terms of as your inspiration or role model in terms of the leader you've become? So who is that person, or who are those people to whom you've looked and you've in some ways have been motivational or inspirational to you in terms of the leaders you've become already in your developing careers?
Happy to kick it off. I mean, for me, Ash, I've been so fortunate that I've had many incredibly talented leaders and folks that I've been able to watch from afar, be able to be coached directly from. And, I think for me, it's easy to draw on coaches. And, two folks come to mind specifically for me. One, certainly Coach Averill, right? Jen is someone that when I look back on my time at Wake, you go through it and she has done tremendous things in her career. And I looked at my 4 years at school and won 3 national championships. And my ability to reflect at that point in time and realize what we were actually accomplishing and how hard that is to do as a leader and a coach, especially repeat doing that, takes an incredibly special leader. And coaching any sport and at any level takes, poise and takes decision-making under pressure. And for me, I was able to watch Jen do that flawlessly over the course of my entire time. And I think now one of the ways that a lot of people describe me that I get to work alongside of is just that. You're super poised, you stay calm under pressure, like you very rarely get rattled. I've seen Jen rattled, so if she's on the call, she's probably giggling to herself, but I have seen her rattled as well. But under pressure, being able to make incredibly insightful decisions, being able to watch that and then allow yourself to develop and evolve and pull from some of those things that you've seen from people that have been very successful. I think for me, that's really helped me a lot. And from there, I was able to go on and coach as well. I've not coached at Wake Forest, but was able to coach for the current head coach at the University of Louisville, Justine Sowery, and just her, her work ethic. That woman is an absolute workaholic. So, working for her and seeing just the tireless hours and the effort that you need to put in to get to where you want to be. Combining those two things and really those two principles and having tremendous leaders. And then, oh, by the way, super talented females, I think is an area to call out as well. So having people that I can look at and say, they look like me, they're females, they've broken some of these ceilings, and they're folks that I say, wow, I have an opportunity to follow some of their footsteps, although, out of the coaching world, certainly have drawn some of my inspiration and things that I operate on day to day from folks like that. So very fortunate for the opportunity to, play and reflect on my time with Jen at Wake Forest.
And I think you've answered the question. Coach Jen is in the audience. She was hopeful. She said, "Are you sure we used all your eligibility, Kel?" So she was, I think you mentioned 4 years, and so I think the answer for Coach Jen is yes. Probably disappointed in that, but she was hopeful that there was a year in there somewhere still.
I wish. Trust for sure.
She adds, empowerment is a byproduct of our connectedness. And so we appreciate, Coach Jen, you in contributing to the chat with some always insightful comments. Our other two panelists, I don't certainly want to shortchange you on that last question. If you have anything to add here as we approach the top of the hour.
I love Tony Bresky, our head coach. He's one of the most influential people in my life. I hope he's not listening because I don't want his ego to get any bigger. But he taught me a lot. He taught me just work ethic. We just clicked that because we just thought the same way. I mentioned earlier that I looked up to some people on my team. When I was a freshman, I had a guy on my team, Ian Atkinson, who was someone I looked up to in a lot of ways, and it's a little things you pick up from a lot of people, right? So those two are definitely that at Wake that were really great to me.
Yeah, and I won't name names, but I will go on to say that the coaching and mentoring doesn't stop when you get to the professional world. Seek people that you respect and trust and know that are doing the right things. Become your mentor. Learn from them. Become your mentor for others as they come behind you. But the coaching just doesn't stop. If you really think about it, a manager is a coach, and you're just trying to get the best out of your resources by changing their behavior and trying to get to a goal. So that never stops. So become the coach you want to be, and you have always admired throughout your career as an athlete. But continue that process and that learning when you get to the business world by finding that people you respect to become your mentor and keep learning and keep getting better.
Such terrific advice. Right? I feel like I've got notes here now that will fill at least 2 chapters of my own kind of, you've been inspirational for me in terms of some leadership skills and characteristics and other behaviors. And so on behalf of Wake Athletics and the Legacy Center for Leadership and Character, I just want to thank you again. We are so grateful. And you are always welcome here, and we're incredibly grateful just on behalf of all those in the audience of hearing your insights, and so proud of all that you've accomplished already. And here you are coming back and giving some really good seasoning and good thoughts to our student athletes and others who are in the audience tonight. And so from again the bottom of our collective heart, we just want to express our gratitude for your time, both getting here and being with us for the last over 1 hour. And we appreciate it. So thank you very, very much. I'm going to give a hand to each of you, and I think everybody else who's probably in the background is doing the same in the audience. So without any further ado, I believe that will conclude our evening tonight, and we appreciate again your time and your sage advice. So
thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Go Deeks.
Go Deeks.
Absolutely. That's as important as anything else. Go Deeks.